Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are going through Dao De Jing, done by Jason in collaboration with Amon. We're going to read the text 3 at a time, 3 verses at a time. Everybody's going to get to comment on it. Then Jason and Amon will comment on it, and then we'll go to the next 3. All right, so we're going to start. Jason, could you go ahead and share the screen?
Okay.
All right, so the first one, we're going to start with 28. Go ahead and type a R if you would like to read. And then after reading, I'm going to ask everybody to comment. So go ahead and type exclamation mark when you want to comment. Evanique, go ahead, Jason.
Please don't forget the title. I think title is important. I spend a lot of time to add the title on that. So, and please also comment on the title.
Okay, wonderful, folks. Again, reiterating, please start by saying chapter 28. You can say the title, Unchanging Virtue, and then read the whole thing. Please don't read Chinese, even if you can. Just read English. All right. So let's start with Evanique, followed by Joe, and then David. So Evanique will be reading 28, Joe 29, David 30. Evanique.
Chapter 28, Unchanging Virtue. Those who know masculinity but live as femininity would be at the valley of the world, because the unchanging virtue would not depart from the valley of the world. It is able to return to a state of infancy. Those who know whiteness but live as blackness would set the standard of the world, because the eternal virtue, De, would not deviate from the standard of the world. It is able to return to the state of boundlessness. Those who know prosperity but stay humble stand at a basin of the world, because the unchanging virtue, De, fills in the basin of the world. It is able to return to a state of the uncarved block, Hu. The divided pieces of the uncarved block are used as tools for special purposes. The sage employs them as officials. A great tailor does little cutting. Hence, it is the divided block that can have great usages.
Thank you. Next up is Joe with number 29.
Chapter 29, Spontaneity. I do not see it as possible to want to conquer the world, let alone try to control it. The world is a spiritual being. No one can control it. Those who try to control it will fail. Those who grasp at it will lose it. Therefore, the sage has never tried to control it, so he never failed. He has never grasped at it, so he has never lost it. We are unable to tell whether people are truly moved by leading or following, whether they breathe from their noses or their mouths, whether a body is truly powerful or weak, whether a building is destroyed by its own dilapidation or by outside forces. For this reason, the sage avoids extremism in ethics, materials, or politics.
Thank you. Next up is David with number 30.
Chapter 30, Not Using Force. Those who use the Tao to advise the rulers wouldn't use the military force to dominate the world. That would soon invite retribution from the military force. Where troops camp, brambles grow. After a major war, ominous years follow. It is proper to simply produce the result without attempting to dominate by force. Thou shalt produce the result without arrogance, produce the result without boasting, produce the result without pride. Produce only when there is no other choice. Produce without using force. That which is too robust ages fast. It does not follow the Tao. Without the Tao, it comes to an early end.
Thank you, David. Folks, now it's time for your comments on 28, 29, and 30. You can choose to comment on just one. You can choose to comment on a concept in any of them or multiple concepts. You can choose to comment on all of them. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to comment. Please go ahead. After everybody comments, then we're going to have Jason, and then we're going to have Amon comment. Please go ahead and type exclamation mark. We'll start with Joe.
Sorry. I'll comment on the one that I read, 29. Yes, this is, I think it's an important, we incorporate the idea of Wu Wei by non-action, and this idea that we think we can control the world through force. It's a false narrative, especially at the time, if you consider that these were individuals that had decisions whether or not to, at a point in time where there was a lot of war, where they had to make a decision of whether or not to conquer someone else. So to manage your desire in that particular type of circumstance is critical in order to follow the way, to be in accordance with the way. It's also the reward that comes along with it. If you're not grasping at something, you can't necessarily lose it. It's the idea that your desires don't dictate what you want, or they don't dictate your actions. So that's what I took away from number 29.
Wonderful. I'm going to read a very interesting comment that my favorite translator, Ursula Le Guin, has on the poem 28. Jason, could you bring up 28? Thank you. She says, the simplicity of Lao Tzu's language in this poem can present an almost impenetrable density of meaning. The reversals and paradoxes in this great poem are the oppositions of the yin and yang, male and female, light and dark, glory and modesty. But the knowing and being of them, the balancing act, results in neither stasis nor synthesis. The riverbed in which power runs leads back. The patterns of power lead back. The valley where the power is contained leads back to the forever new, endless, straightforward way. Reversal, recurrence are the movement, and yet the movement is onward. Next up is Kevin.
Yes, thank you. I just joined. I'm going to comment on chapter 29. It's from a Chinese called 天下神奇不可为不可知. This is about the tradition with respect to the nature, and it's normally we modern world we can control world, control the situation. So that's something we need to learn from it. It's not everything we can control. Follow the nature pattern, and learn from it. I'm going to pause now. I'm going to try to read it again for chapter 30, and I'm going to come back. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. All right. So now we can go to David. David, go ahead.
Well, this is a very quick comment about 29 again, that the world is a spiritual being. That reminded me of all these discussions we've really had about the Gita and the Brahma, but I mean that all of us, that this entire existence is conceptualized as a being here itself, and the connection to that the Tao is considering all of us and these and to not control it, that we need to one can see be a part of it, but not to grasp at it. So I just noticed that connection.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is Jason.
Oh. Okay, so sounds like nobody comment on 30s. Okay, so do we? Yeah. Okay, so let's go through this one. I think 28. The title called the Unchanging Virtue. Okay, so this virtue basically it talking about the practice way more solid than Tao itself. So if you pay attention on 28, basics is talking about similar to the later chapter. I don't remember the chapter number, but like a staying low. Okay, so the position is staying low. Like so, the metaphor would be body, which is in the low point, like infant, and also bring up the kind of personal training, how you what you should behave like a pool uncarved block. Okay, so I think that's the important message on 28. And the 29, I personally like this a lot because it talks about spontaneity, and a lot of translation call it nature because I think they use the word. Do they use the word nature? No. Okay, so spontaneity and the nature. Okay, so in Chinese called 自然. Okay, but most translate call nature. But I think that they have a subtle difference. When spontaneity means no cause by itself, it's similar to nature, but it's spontaneity by itself. So you will see this side, this theme very often throughout all the Dao De Jing, because Laozi or Taoism doesn't believe the outside force can change things. Only the inside force itself can change things. So the spontaneity is important in the whole Dao De Jing text. Number 30, nobody comment on this one. I think this one is similar to 28 about your position, but more on the political side, okay, more solid. So basics is talking about a lot the military, reflected to the contemporary situation, a lot of war. Okay, so it talking about like your attitude and the strong will die early. So that's the concept. And if you just a little bit about later chapter, like after 70, if you pay attention on the later chapter, they have a lot of things talk about military things. So this one is the early one, talk about the military. So remember the military, the Taoism teaching is if you build the strong military force, it will just like people get so strong and then you will die early. So like, and actually it's true. If you build up too strong military, you spend a lot of money, eventually you will damage your economy and you will, the country will get a problem. I think that's similar to today's situation. So that's it. Amon, your turn.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like everyone has said what the commentary on these particular chapters. I want to talk about the process here briefly, just to say that revisiting these chapters, I realized that this is when I felt like I was sort of catching a stride in this process, that this is probably about the point where Jason and I had developed sort of the rhythm of how this process was going to unfold. And yeah, I can really it's almost nice. It's been so long since we did these chapters, or since I had any participation in it. It's nice to revisit it and sort of see that, yeah, I still like that. I still feel that that's a good way of expressing that. And yeah, I think everyone said most of what these chapters mean to say, which is, here are the lessons of following the Tao, and here's how you do it. And it's going to feel awkward and unusual because it's the opposite of what you think of as being a powerful leader. But this is where real power lies, is in this reversal of expectations.
Thank you, Amon. And just like it took time for you guys to catch the stride in doing the translations, this meetup is also kind of starting a little bit slow as people are coming in, people are getting comfortable, getting their translations out, getting their notes out. So everything is going to keep picking up as we go on. So now let's go to the next 3 chapters. Go ahead and type an R if you would like to read. And then immediately after reading, we're going to ask people to comment, and everybody's going to comment first, and then Jason, and then Amon is going to comment. So it's for this one, go ahead and we're going to start. Anybody who has not read before or commented before will get a priority first. So we're going to start with Penny, Joe, and David. Penny.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Chapter 31, on the left. Talking about weaponry, it is not an auspice. Things most likely turn away from it. Those who attain Tao would not stay with it. The officers, Junzi, use the stationary on the left in regular times. Those who only employ the weaponry on the right in times of war. Because weaponry is not an auspice, it is not for the officers, it is only employed when there is no other choice. At best, it is used dispassionately and in repose. Victory should not be glorified. Glorifying victory is to enjoy killing. Those who enjoy killing cannot achieve their aspirations in the world. Ceremonies of happiness are positioned to the left. Ceremonies of woe are positioned to the right. The lieutenant general is positioned to the left for civilian duty. The major general is positioned to the right for military duty. The military affairs should be presided over as a funeral. Killing in multitude should be mourned with tears. Victory of the military should be presided over as a funeral.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joe.
Chapter 32, knowing how to behave. The Tao is an unchanging law. Its manifestation cannot be named. Although the Tao is impeccable or imperceptible, the world cannot subjugate it. If the ruler can stay with the Tao, all things, including people, would voluntarily follow him. Nature, sky, and earth, in harmony would reign with sweet dew. People would self-adjust without government orders. The social norms would abide by their names. As names are established, people would know how to behave. As people know how to behave, the social order would be sustained. The Tao to the world is the same as brooks to the basin and rivers to the sea.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is going to be David.
Chapter 33, on self. Those who know people are wise. Those who know themselves are enlightened. Those who can excel over others are strong. Those who can excel over themselves are powerful. Those who are content are wealthy. Those who are perseverant are aspirational. Those who don't lose their original minds are enduring. Those who died but are not to be forgotten are immortal.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, David. Folks, it's time to comment. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark to comment on any of these 3 verses. You can talk about an individual idea, multiple ideas. You can talk about multiple verses, whatever you choose. I'm going to start with Evanik, followed by Joe. Evanik.
So I think in chapter 31, where it talks about victory, victory should not be glorified. Glorified victory is enjoying killing. That one struck me, I guess, as a former debate coach. Victory was victory. That's what you wanted. But if you think about it, you're kind of hurting the other person. And so, like, yes, it is a form of killing, because when you try to get victory over someone else, you're trying to dominate them. And that makes them, when a person is dominated, makes them feel less than who they are. So I can see this. I know this applies to war, but I think this can apply to life. When you're trying to beat someone at something, or you're trying to dominate somebody at something, it just leaves them as a less of a person. And if you're going by namaste, it also leaves you a little bit less as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Evanik. Next up is Joe, followed by Penny. Joe.
Yeah, and that was almost the identical point that I wanted to bring up when it came to number 31, how victory, should be analyzed. The fact is that everybody loses in something like war, so that it's not something that should be celebrated under any conditions, because it obviously is, you're going away from the Tao. But it's also, if somebody was attacking you, even if you had to defend yourself as a way of, as a way of protecting yourself, then it would still be a tragedy, and it shouldn't feel good under any circumstances. So it should always be a last resort. And that holds true, I think, also just in any kind of competition that we can encounter in our daily lives. You always notice people that are able to handle themselves gracefully by doing things well. And then there are those who need to let you know they did it well. And that's kind of unattractive, to say the least. And I think that that's truly the beauty of leadership, in the sense that you can actually do something well, not tell anybody about it, because that's an example for the rest of the world.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Penny, Kevin, and Margarita. Penny.
Okay, chapter 33. Put that one up. Oh, okay. Well, I thought this was a fantastic short little poem, and basically saying a lot like we have been talking about in Enlightenment in the Gita, though, that you should know yourself, and those who know themselves are the ones who are enlightened. They're the ones who really have power in the world. They would be content if they know themselves, they're following the Tao, and that's really wealth. That's really, material wealth is not real wealth. This is really wealth. And those who, strive to stay in the Tao and aspire to it, those are somebody, that you should look up to. And those who basically maintain their mind and nature, like their original mind, their return to what nature is, then that's what's enduring. And those are the people that even once they die would be remembered.
Thank you. Thank you, Penny. Next up is Margarita, Kevin, followed by Margarita and Joe. Kevin.
Thank you. From chapter 31, our value, very important last sentence. It's called 再胜以丧礼处之. Victor of military should be presided over as a funeral, not a celebration, not a ceremony. That's so profound. Look at history about the war. Who is the winner? Who is the loser? I'm sorry to see that even modern days from US, let's see who is winner for each war. Could be only the winner is a military complex. That industry, that's the winner I can see. Rest, all losers. From chapter 32, it's the very interesting called Dao Cao Wu Ming. The Dao has no name. If I'm sorry, it's a little bit different yours, but yours makes sense too. So that's beautiful about the Chinese word. One name. I'm going to start saying that like this today actually. 也有尽而亦无穷. That means a word is limited. We put a flat down word static, but the meaning is unlimited. So I put a direct, translation. Dao has no name. It's so small, but you can conquer it. Even now, I'm not sure that's not related. You think about the pandemic virus. Can you see it? It's too small. They have own Dao work on. Can you conquer it? It's hard. From chapter 33. I'm going to read all Chinese. It's beautiful. Always basically we still use it in common days. 知能者智，自知则明；胜能者有力，自胜则强；知足则富，强行则有志；不知其所则已，所则有；死而不亡则寿。Last word, south, longitude. For this whole sentence, I value that one. It's a code 自胜者强, based Jason's translation. Those who can excel over themselves are powerful and strong, or strong. That's if we can overcome own weakness, we can open our own mind, keep learning. It's beautiful. You are the winner. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Margarita, followed by Joe. Margarita.
Yes, thank you. I would like to see chapter 32 because I remember I had a good reflection on it. So sometimes we as human dealing with many uncertainty, we try to control things by naming things and making more regulation laws. And that's what probably happened currently. Well, social norms are built like over and over, and more people putting themselves as the ruler, like over others. But actually dealing with this, sometimes we need just to return to the Tao, where it should be very natural. There will be ups and downs, but that is the way, and people will adjust. So again, we need to know when to stop, even to stop controlling or making rules over ourselves or over others. Yeah, I like this first. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. Next up is Joe.
I had similar comments to 32, and I even actually brought it up in our meetup last night at the Asian Philosophies meetup, that what happens when you go ahead and break something that's the whole down into its parts and you start naming things. And so that there's in something that its order is created, yes, but you're also losing something in that process. You're putting it into a box. And so that it's not necessarily, it's adding order, but it's also not necessarily recognizing the essence of whatever you're looking at. And so we discussed that briefly on last night.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to read again the comment on just this number 32 by Ursula Le Guin, which makes a similar point that Joe was making, and showing the connection to chapter 1. The second verse connects the uncut, the uncarved, the unusable, to the idea of the unnamed presented in first chapter. Name is the mother of the 10,000 things. You have to make order. You have to make distinctions, but you also have to know when to stop before you have lost the whole in the multiplicity of parts. The simplicity or singleness of the way is that of water, which always rejoins itself. Next up is David.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment about 33. That I mean, I think, as Jim was saying, it's an amazing, compact, succinct poem. I guess I'm sort of curious more to hear about the translation of those last two lines. It's still in the beginning of it just really flows really well. I guess I'm curious what especially what Amon is going to say later. I mean, I'm sure those last two lines are, the literal translation, but it seems like there's some poetry missing in that. I'm just not certain how to, how to express that better. But I think it's really nice, sort of these couplets of, the first part of people and themselves, enlightenment, and how to, both excel. I mean, to excel over themselves, to be enlightened. I mean, again, as Kevin and others were saying, to sort of look inward for the strength, and to look inward for the power. Yeah, it's that sort of, died but not forgotten, and immortal. There's just, and the original minds, I saw that one other translation talked about don't lose their center. It just seems like there's I don't think the English expresses the beauty and the poetry as much as the first, and those first 6 lines are just an amazingly effective translation.
Thank you, David. I'm going to read out the translation that Ursula Le Guin has done of the last 2 lines. She's put it very differently. She says, to live till you die is to live long enough. That's how she puts it. Next up is Jason.
Hold on. Yeah, thank you. I think the Shrinkan just read the last line. Okay, can you read one more time? I want to write it down.
To live till you die is to live long enough.
Okay, I think that's very good translation, not literally, but meaningful. Okay, so, and when I revisit this one, I also kind of question, I put an underline here, so I will rethink about this one, because this one is Chinese word called soul. Okay, and I put this immortal. I should try to, I don't think that's right. Okay, to westernize. Okay, because immortal is kind of Western concept and not the Chinese concept. Chinese would like to use shou when people have like birthday at 80, over 80, will use this word. That means live a long time. But okay, so that's another subject. Okay, but the beauty of this one, 33, is you will see if you read the Chinese, just like Kevin read, right? 智明有力强, okay, 富智久寿. That's all nice thing, all thing people expected. But the good thing here is the subject on yourself. And then if you read Greek philosophy, right? The Taoic maxim, the first one is know thyself, right? Know yourself. And here it's a little bit more than know thyself, because you have to focusing on yourself. So they are talking about some good things. So knowing other people is wise, but knowing yourself is enlightened, much better than wise. Winning other people, excel over other people is strong, but it's more difficult is excel over yourself. That's more important. So a lot of things you are thinking about competing, but actually you should compete yourself. So I think that's the whole essence on 33. And then 32 basics. A little bit thing about the translation. I think most translation talk about stop, where to stop. Okay, but I translate as behave, which is literally not right, because if the Chinese word is stop, which is stop, but I think Chinese stop is different than English stop, because here the stop talking about the boundary is not really like freeze, stop, this kind of stuff. Be doing something until somewhere. Okay, so I think that's the difference in the translation. Another important concept in this one is name. Just like Xuan read the translation, it's related to the first one, right? The chapter 1 talking about the name is the mother, one which is the beginning of all things, 10,000 things. So talking about nameless and the name. So just like a few days ago in the Asian philosophy meetup, we talk about the school of names, and the Taoism pick up these names. So the Tao is nameless, but they don't totally reject the name. So here you will see Dao Chang Wu Ming. Wu Ming, that means no name, nameless. Different translation. I'm not going to go detail on the translation, but at the beginning talking about the Tao is no name. But later on here, you will see a name, You Ming. Okay, so from no name to have name, being named. Okay, so what's the difference? The Tao itself has no name. Just break down, and when the regular people, they have the name. So they become the social norm. People know how to behave, okay, or where to stop. The literary words is people know where to stop, okay. But my translation is, since Tao is no name, but you break down, then have the name, which become a social norm. People know how to behave, or people know where to stop. I think that's the subtle difference here. And I think here is, if I'm translating the legalism text, I probably use stop, okay, forbidden. But here is Taoism, more praise on the free spirit. So I would like to translate as behave, because behave until somewhere. So I think that's the difference. 31 is another text about military, reflect the contemporary situation about the military. So I think a lot of things we already talked, but I like to a little bit mention on the left and the right. So in general, in that time, left in doing the civilian affair, right is doing the military affair. Left is in the lower position, right in the higher position during that time. So this one, they try to tell people, especially the ruler, the person who in charge in the military, about the left and the right. So focus on the civilian, not the military. So this one will be similar message as you read the Art of War. Okay, in the Art of War, very famously, they're talking about waging a war and the won and the win, right? It's not a good thing. The good thing, the best thing is winning without waging a war. So if you already wage a war and then you fight, you won, you lose also. The good thing is without waging any war, and then you already won the war. So that's the situation they are talking about. So I will stop here, and then Amon, please.
Amon, before you, I think, let me go with Margarita first, and then you can do the epilogue. Margarita.
Sure.
Okay. I was thinking about chapter 33. That is a compact list of virtue, De. From previously we talked about Dao. Now we're talking about De. What interesting, those are positive attitude, like capacities. However, I think when we see the list, we need to be able to identify which are the essence, the most important one. You can choose to be wise, you can choose to be strong, or do you want to be enlightened or powerful? There's no good, right or wrong. You need to be able to see the essence. What do you want to choose? And the last part, I remember, I think last week I watched this documentary about a king from Kim dynasty that he wanted to be immortal by finding this elixir. Actually, he's drinking poison because he thought that will give him long life. So perhaps we can also see that in our modern world where people want to live longer because that is considered as the immortal. But actually the essence is to create memories, to make that you live a good life for you to remember and your children or your family to remember. That is actually the immortality. Yeah, that's my take. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. Next up is Amon.
Thank you all. I have precious little to add. I wanted to add, again, on the form as much as anything. I was looking back over chapter 32 there. And one of the things, Jason, that I really like with this chapter is the direct reference to other chapters where you go line by line and say, this is a repeat of chapter 21, or where you say this refers to is referred to in chapter 44. That sort of direct guidepost is something I haven't seen in a lot of translations. And it's something I just kind of picked up on this second time reading, seeing it through and realizing that's really innovative. And I think that's a wonderful addition. As far as the broader context, these chapters, there's been a theme throughout the Dao De Jing. I've already pointed to it. It's been talked about the importance of keeping to a more yin way, why the yin path is the more important one. But in these few chapters, I think you get an indication of what's the alternative and what's the peril of a more yang way. And I think the theme that comes out is yang is fleeting. Anything done in a yang manner, one of its intrinsic characteristics is that it will be more fleeting. It doesn't endure. It is, flash in the pan, as it were, which is why these images of water and of the basin and of pool, the uncarved block, are meant to be images of enduring qualities. The last thing I would say about chapter 33 and these very tight couplets, and I think Margarita, you touched on this, is do you want wisdom or do you want enlightenment? Do you want power or do you want to be strong? Well, you want both. Here we begin to see how paradox is actually not a conflict. It's not a conflict to know other people and know yourself. It's not a conflict to be able to excel over others, but also to excel over your own expectations. These things can coexist in harmony. The last conflict we encounter in this, to die but be immortal, is a conflict that is meant to be a paradox that sort of causes our gears to grind to a halt. We can reconcile those other paradoxes quite quickly, quite easily in our own minds, but here we encounter one that defies our experience of the world around us. And the Taoist teaching is being challenged to once again confront paradox and reconcile it, not synthesize it, not pick one over the other, but to actually embrace both. There's some scholarly conflict about, specific words that are used in different translations, but the idea to die and be long-lived as both long-lived or immortal, as being not at odds with one another. And it's funny that she mentions the Emperor Ching, Qin Shi Huangdi, using elixirs to develop immortality. The great irony is that he died and nobody knew it except for a couple of advisors for almost a month, where they kept a fish cart behind his trailer so that people wouldn't smell. So even in death, he remained long-lived, still giving orders. I think that would be the pithy example of reconciling that paradox.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Amon. All right. Next, we're going to go to the next 3 chapters, and we're going to have Evanik, David, and Joe read it. Evanik, go ahead.
Chapter 34, Being Great. The Tao is like water flowing all over. Left and right means all over the place. All things depend on it and are never dismissed. It accomplishes but never possesses. It nurtures all things, but it never dominates. In this regard, it seems small. All things submit themselves to it, but it never dominates. In this regard, it seems great. Because the Tao never claims its own greatness, it always succeeds at being great.
Thank you. Next up is going to be David. No, let's do Margarita first, followed by David. Margarita.
Okay, chapter 35, Image of Tao. He who grasps the magnitude of the image of the Tao attracts people from around the world. People amaze without harming each other and bring security, peace, and prosperity. Music and food can only mollify people temporarily. The words about the Tao are insipid and flavorless. Such words are indistinct when we read them, unclear when we listen to them. Can you roll? Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. But that's only the last part. But inexhaustible when we use them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Margarita. Next up is David.
Chapter 36, The Subtlety of Tao. To close something, first open it. To weaken something, first strengthen it. To abolish something, first promote it. To take away something, first give it. This is the subtlety of using flexibility and weakness to conquer the hard and strong. Just like fish cannot live out of deep water, don't show the strength of your country to others.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, folks. So time for comments. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to comment. We'll start with Evanik.
I wanted to comment on number 34. I think I love that one so much because it's allowing the person to be great, and it almost doesn't have to depend on anybody else. It shows, and I know it's talking about the Tao, but it seems like it could be applied to us, because you can be great and not lord it over anybody, or not try to use your greatness to dominate someone else. Because if you are truly great, or you're being great, you don't even want to do that. You just want to be the best person you can be, and then that will allow other people to be great. And that's how you succeed at being great, is not only you being great, but by you being great, other people can be great.
Thank you, Evanik. Okay, next up is going to be Joe.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that those are excellent comments for number 34. It kind of relates back to not having to dominate something and nurturing something. But this also relates to verse 17, where the people say, we did it. And it's part of leadership, essentially, where, again, it's not about being in charge or possessing. It's about essentially a passive way of ruling. So that's, and I think that kind of relates to 36 as well. So with 36, it is, essentially to weaken something, first strengthen it, to abolish something, first promote it. And I think that this is a very yin way of actually approaching the way of essentially ruling, not necessarily ruling through force, but ruling through or conquering through through a much more subtle way, almost being like water, just going with the flow and eventually overwhelming whatever it is, the rock or that may be, blocking it. So I don't know, that didn't come off too well, but anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up is David, followed by Margarita, Shrikant, and Kevin. David.
Yes, I was saying, I really like these comparison types of chapters. And I mean, this like 36, I think this is really great. I think, and I really enjoy Jason's translation of this compared to all of the others. I mean, not just that it's lacking this additional commentary that many of the other translators, not that they aren't great translations in their own way, but that it's so succinct here. And I think that it really highlights the sort of core of this and helps to, with these very structured, sort of logical arrays or tables that Jason's created, and really sort of these succinct comparison couplets. I think it really strengthens the actual Dao De Jing itself and what it's trying to communicate and how it's trying to get the concept across here. Because I think that at least it resonates more with me, I'll say. I don't know about other readers, but I think that it really helps to show people how to through these contrasts how to apply the Tao. And so that's what I think that this is one of sort of the areas where Jason's translations really shine.
Thank you, David. It's going to be Margarita, followed by Shrikant. Margarita.
Yes, I want to talk about chapter 35. I think this is a clear, and it's an explanation about Wu Wei, about peacefulness and happiness is something that you want to find. However, you don't need to work too hard because it will come by itself, by nature. So chasing peace and happiness is just your illusion. And chapter 36, I also like this because I think in this chapter, it explained about how to, previous chapter talk about how being leadership is yin, and also you can also do the yang. But this time, I think there's this balance, the dynamic balance between yin and yang. I remember there's this story about a priest, Buddhist priest, who previously he was a drug addict, criminals. And when he talked about how do you see your life now, I say, no regrets, because after I had that, now I want to become better. So probably that's a perfect balance of a yin and yang to build harmony through dynamicity. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. I'm going to comment on number 34 and 35. I see them as a pair. And there is this great theme that we've been looking at of center and periphery. And I think these two poems do a very good job of naming the nature of the center and periphery and the relationship between the two. So in number 34, the Tao is like water flowing all over. Left and right means all over the place. All things depend on it and are never dismissed. It accomplishes, but never possesses. It nurtures all things, but it never dominates. In this regard, it seems small. All things submit themselves to it, but it never dominates. In this regard, it seems great. Because the Tao never claims its own greatness, it always succeeds at being great. So to me, this is saying the Tao is at the center. It is the cause of everything. Everything flows by it, It is flowing through everything. It is moving everything, but it's not possessing anything. It's not stopping anywhere. It is just flowing through it's like the center of gravity towards which everything is flowing. So the quiet ground, whereas everything else, the 10,000 things are the figures that people are focused on, but it is the ground of the great flow. Now, if you go to number 35, this figure and ground is, that distinction is made very clear. He who grasps the magnitude of the image, the Tao, attracts people from around the world. So the center is sitting at the center. It is attracting everything. People amass without harming each other. Everything is moving naturally. They bring security, peace, and prosperity. Now, in the periphery, there is a lot of noise going on. Music and food can only mollify people temporarily. So this is all happening outside, which is very garish, very gaudy. The words of the Tao are insipid and flavorless and almost nameless. It is very quiet, indistinct when we read them, unclear when we listen to them, but inexhaustible when we use them. So this is, again, a good way of describing the flavor of the difference of experience of the 10,000 things, which give you very radical sensory input, and the quietness of the Tao, which is running through all of this and is fueling all of it. So I think this captures the center and periphery themes very well, both these poems. Thank you. Next up is Kevin, Zhang, Evanik, and Zhang. Kevin.
Thank you. First, chapter 34. I try to pick a practical way. Chinese called 功成而不名有. It accomplishes, basically the third, fourth line translates. It accomplishes but never possess. In the last chapter 33, they also 知足者富. We also have idiom 知足者常乐. Basically, those who satisfy. What about the wealthy? Here, saying those who know satisfaction are wealthy. Who knows enough? Otherwise, who going to, let's see, say, when is enough for retirement? What are my career goal? Where's the stop the boundary? You have to think about this. It's hard. Back to chapter 35. My pick the first two sentences. 知大象天下网. He who holds the big picture about the great idea of Tao attract people from around the world. I would use US example. Big picture attract all the talent people. All are talent scientific, they go into the world, they build a great good thing in US. Nowadays that's our choice. If you're going to walk back, that's another one. So 知大象天下网. That's the big picture is so important. That's the Tao. Chapter 36 next. I picked the Guru Seng Gang Qiang. Basically, it's relationship about the dynamic. I agree with McGregor, about the very dynamic change from the weak to the strong. The Guru Seng Gang Qiang. This is subtlety of using flexibility and weakness to conquer the heart and strong. Normally, we consider strong is conquer weakness. Here, saying is 四位微明. The title Jason mentioned is Subtlety of Tao. Not strong, the subtle of Tao. It's very small. 微明, little like bright. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Zhang, followed by Evanik. Zhang.
Yeah, I also want to talk about chapter 36. I found this it's quite interesting. The paradox, like if you want to close something, you have to be open first. If you want to weaken it, have to be strength first. So you can't weak something who are like weak. So it's kind of interesting because I think they mentioned something like if you don't own anything, there's nothing to lose, basically. So it's I personally think it's quite interesting because we always try to accomplish more, conquer more, but then you're actually in a position to lose, which is kind of ironic. I mentioned our neighbor, recently have some accident, their house collapsed. And interestingly, I talked with him. He used to live next door to me because there's no view there. So he moved to a bigger house. But then it's collapsed. But anyway, it's such ironic something, like just like when you're winning, you have to be super cautious because then you have more chance to fail. So it's kind of all these paradoxes all come together. So we actually make us more aware. The yin and yang is all hands in hand. So we have to be more aware of it so we can prepare for anything happens. That's what I learned. When I read this, I found, the paradox is everywhere. We really have to aware it.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheng. Next up is Evanique.
Yes, I also wanted to comment on 36, and I think my comments are probably going to change after Cheng spoke. So I think sometimes, it's first, this seemed a little odd, like, especially the part about to weaken something for strengthen it. Because I'm like, I thought we weren't doing that. I thought we weren't going to try to weaken something. But I kind of get this in that, like, sometimes, like, when you see someone who maybe isn't qualified or who you think is doing something wrong, your first thing you want to do is call them out, right? And you want to point out to everybody that they're wrong. But I think this passage takes a step back and just kind of has a wu way about it, in that, you just kind of let it sit back and let things happen. And instead of like trying to weaken something, you strengthen it. And sometimes you can strengthen it by doing nothing. And you'll see, I think it kind of is like, you'll see the truth of it. And, you don't really have to do anything. You can just be great, as it talks about in the previous chapters, and allow other people to be great. And then if there's something off about a person, then it'll show for itself. You don't really need to do anything because you trying to do something weakens you. Like, you were strong and now you will be weakened as well if you're trying. So that's what I got from it.
Thank you. Thank you, Evanique. Next up is Jason.
Everybody talk about 36. And then I would say 36 is, how should I call this? By coincidence, 34, 35, 36 all talk about the paradoxy. Okay, something like A and not B, strong and weak, closed and open, all this one. And 36, in my words, it's a dangerous chapter. Okay, you can read it in two ways, and most people read in the good way. Okay, so this one is subtlety of the Tao. So don't be too strong, they'll be weak, don't be blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, but this one, if you turn around the table, okay, it becomes a military strategy. It's related to the famous Chinese 36 strategy, right? You want to catch something, set it free first. Okay, so you read this one turn to the table, read the other way. Okay, become a strategic reading, right? If you want to weak somebody, you kind of let your enemy become strong, right? You want to destroy something, let them do something good, build something so they can destroy it, right? So kind of like during the Cold War, okay, American and the USSR and the Soviet Russia, they try to, seduce the Russian, okay, to build their military, they eventually corrupt. Okay, so I think this one you can read in the two tape on the both sides of table. So if you read it the other side, it becomes a military strategy. So that's the thing. I think that's I would call it a dangerous chapter, depending on how are you going to read it. So 35 and then I think this one, I think most of people mention most of things, especially like Kevin talk about the 直大象天下王, right? If you read it by word, they use holding a big elephant. Okay, everybody will go, but the elephant means the big image. Okay, big picture on this. Okay, so you can read this way. And I like to mention is here it talks about the words of the Tao sounds insipid and flavorless. Okay, if you remember on the chapter 61 or 62, we talk about like doing act without action, right? And they talk about taste, the flavorless. So here's the subtle things, right? The basics, the Tao is flavorless, but you can last forever. Okay, just like everything, right? If you take the drug, you got the high immediately, or get the drink, you got high immediately, but it loses quickly. But so your enjoyment is like slow, gradually enjoy, then you can last for a long time. I think that's the message it's talking. And then chapter 34. Okay, so this one I will focus on very last sentence, right? So this one is, to me, this one is very Buddhism thinking, especially the Zen Buddhism idea. Okay, so that's assumed Zen Buddhism is invented in China. So this is the connection here. And in the Dao De Jing, you probably will see a lot of format like this. You want to, okay, the sage is not doing A or something, so he can achieve something. Okay, so that's the concept here. So here you talk about the Tao, never claim the greatness, so the Tao can be being great. Later on, talk about the sage never strive or never compete with people, so nobody can compete with you. So very similar to the Zen Buddhism teaching. You want to achieve nirvana, right? And nirvana means the totally free. Okay, you don't claim it, you don't stick with it. If you stick with it, you cannot do it. So that's like the teaching, the format happened in Dao De Jing a lot. Yeah, thank you.
Amon?
Again, I like going last because it gives everyone a chance to say things I would normally babble about. But what I am appreciating is, as we're going through this, forging connections that might have been missed had we only been zeroed in on one or two chapters. Shirkan, you linked 34 and 35 very well together and demonstrate how they actually sort of bridge to one another. But having just seen 33, I can see where that leads into 34. And just in terms of themes, 33 is about being the self being sufficient. You are enough. And in 34, the Tao is great because it never claims its own greatness. It is enough to be as it is, and that's where its greatness resides. So I start to see these themes that act as bridges from one chapter into the next, pointing back at one another, taking ideas and expanding them forward, and also titillating with the same sort of, like we said, paradox being the thing that is constantly a struggle here. But that last chapter 36, where Jason was talking about the sort of dangerous interpretation of it, or what I like to refer to as the Machiavellian interpretation of it. This is an instructional. Here is a toolkit. You want to be successful, you want to accomplish something. Think about doing the opposite of what you would normally do first and really tease that out. If you want to weaken something, strengthen it. Imagine just talking somebody up. No, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. All of that sort of constant support can be enough to cause them to overlook things, cause them to forget, oh, this detail, that detail, and lo and behold, watch them collapse. You want to abolish something, promote it. Oh, everybody needs to do this. This would be great. It reminds me of the Pokemon Go fad that lasted for all of about 3 weeks, and everyone did it, and then everyone was bored of it, and it has been abolished. I don't know anyone who's still doing it. This instructional can be applied in a very Machiavellian manner, and I think that's kind of what Jason was hinting at here. But it still takes those ideas of paradox and presents them to you as an instructional. And it points out in that last line, just like fish cannot live out of deep water, don't show the strength of your country to others. If you want to be a big fish, then you need to reside in the deep waters. You need not to strut like a peacock in order for people to feel compelled to respect you. That respect will come if you simply work at the depth, and if you don't show your cards, don't pretend, but don't put on a facade of importance and strength. Just keep being humble, and eventually you'll see people's response being, oh, there's a person of depth, there's something very serious to be taken serious here.
Thank you, Amon. I particularly like your comments about the meta comment about the experience of reading these all together and seeing connections between them. And I absolutely agree with that. The point that you made about 33, the 33, 34, 35, all of them are one unit. 33 states it in a slightly different way, the same point. Wonderful. All right, folks. So we're going to go for the next three. And then what we're going to do is we're going to step back and look at this process of looking at the whole and parts. So that's so 37 is going to be Joe, David, and Margarita. So Joe, go ahead.
Chapter 37, Wu Wei. The Tao is constantly acting Wu Wei, and still nothing is left undone. If the rulers can practice this, all things can transform as they should. As they transform, they may develop as they desire. I shall subdue them in the nameless simplicity of an uncarved block. The nameless simplicity of an uncarved block can curb the desires. Without desires, there comes peace. The world will stabilize as it should.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is David.
Chapter 38. Keep to what is essential. The skillful virtue actions don't follow laws of virtue because the actions are already full of virtues. The unskillful actions of virtue don't disobey laws of virtue because the actions are short of virtues. The skillful actions of virtue are actions of non-action, wu wei, without intentions. The unskillful actions of virtue are actions and with intentions. The skillful acts out of humanness are actions without intentions. The skillful acts of righteousness are actions with intentions. The skillful acts out of ritual are actions without any genuine responses. People then must be dragged by arms to perform the rituals. Therefore, lacking the Tao, people start to act from virtue. Lacking virtue, people start to act from humanness. Lacking humanness, people start to act from righteousness. Lacking righteousness, people start to act from rituals.
Those who act from rituals lack loyalty and trustworthiness. Usually disturbances start with this action. Those who believe rituals only act from the flowery style of the Tao, usually follies begin from this belief. Therefore, the great people always keep to what is essential, avoid what is superficial, keep to what is fruitful, avoid what is flowery. Indeed, they prefer what is within to what is without.
Thank you, David. Next up is Margarita. Jason, could you, thank you.
Chapter 39, Attain Oneness. These things in the past that attain oneness are as follows. The sky having attained oneness would be clear. The land having attained oneness would be peaceful. The spirit having attained oneness would be active. The basins having attained oneness would be abundant. All things having attained oneness would be productive. Rulers having attained oneness would be the pillars of the world. Furthermore, if the sky is not clear, one day it may be fractured. If the land is not peaceful, one day it may be disturbed. If the spirits are not active, one day they may be sedated. If the basin are not abundant, one day they may be dried up. If all things are not productive, one day they may be extinct. If the rulers are not pillars, but merely noble and high, one day they may be overthrown. Thus, nobility is based on the humble pillar's base. Height is grounded on the lowly. This is why the rulers choose humble words like the separated one, the lonely one, the unsalaried man to refer to themselves. Isn't this a case of taking the humble as the base? Isn't this so? Therefore, many honors are like no honors at all. Desire not to be glamorous like jade, but to be solid like simple rock.
Thank you, Margarita. Folks, now it's time for comments. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to comment. It's going to be Madeline, followed by Joe. Madeline.
Yes, I think 38 and 39 seem to be a Taoist slam on Confucianism once again. I'm also wondering about the use of the word basin. It had come up in one of the earlier ones in which dough flowed into the basin and then became a block of uncarved wood. So the basin was sort of acting as a mold, in a sense, for this essence. And I'm just wondering about the recurrence of the word basin here, if it's a different character, but the same word in English, or what the implications would be in Chinese for basin.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Penny. Joe.
So I'm still actually processing number 37. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously the idea of non-action, and I guess having essentially having living in accordance with the way that you're not necessarily feeling the need to act, and essentially things will turn out the way they should, and not necessarily tying yourself to or trying to control the outcomes. And as they transform, they may develop as they desire. Again, I think that this is this is something where you're following the way, and you're not controlling things. That's what I get from number 37. I'm still actually working out my comments.
You can
for
go ahead
38.
and continue. I'll come back to you. Go ahead and type
Oh, good.
mark whenever
Thank
you're
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up is going to be Penny, followed by Kevin, and then Joe. Penny.
Okay, chapter 38. I just wanted, can you scroll down a little further? Yeah, that's far enough. The paragraph, the top paragraph there, I think it's very interesting because they're talking basically about the difference between being a spiritual person, acting from love in the center, and somebody who's just basically materialistic and just is following rituals and things like that, but without any meaning in them. So the people who act from the Tao act with virtue naturally, but if they don't act naturally from that, then they start to try to act well, but when they're trying to act well, they're really not acting well because it's just a game with them to try to act virtuous. And then people who are even beyond that don't even try to act well. They're just following the rituals that are there. So if they don't even have the righteousness, then they just follow the rituals. So I just thought that was an interesting progression there in that poem.
Thank you, Penny. Next up is Yogeshwar, followed by Kevin. Yogeshwar.
Yeah, actually, Penny actually pointed out what I wanted to say, but I just wanted to add a bit because if we could take an example, like when we say sorry or when we say please or thank you to a person, yeah, sometimes we are just saying it because it's a habit, because it's just a habit. We just say it because it's a habit, and then sometimes we're saying it because we want to look right by the other person. And other times we may be saying it because we want to manipulate the other person. But how good would it be, like, when we say it from the depth of our hearts, which it is actually supposed to be meant to be?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. Next up is Kevin, followed by David. Kevin.
Thank you. This is 37th last chapter of the Tao, if we base our modern separation. For me, understand first, I'm going to read it out first. 道常无为而无不为. So for me, Tao is unchanging law, or is eternal, or 无为. And another part is different. Jason is undone. I would say also Tao cannot do anything. So if follow Tao, this Tao way is the way it should work. It work. So it's a different. We consider Wu Wei is one side. Not effort. Actually, also for me, my own terms. 无为有所为有所不为. We can undo something. We can effortless or with effort do something. Follow the Tao. That's for chapter 37. Next 38 is a long one. I'm sorry, I still pick my short version of 38. It's called about 德，少德不德，是以有德；下德不失德，是以无德. This chapter separate about the 德少is 少德, up 德, or use Jason as skillful virtue, and 下德. So also I'm going to post my comment about the relationship about here. it's put on the chat. They have an order here. So you see from Dao, De, a separate Shao De, Xia De, and the humanism and rituals and ritual, Li. I would say add two more if for modern days. Another is the law and economic trading, like fairness, exchange the money related thing. So here, originally based this chapter, from the first top is the Dao, follow the Dao. It's an ideal word, follow the Dao. We don't need it. We kind of smaller government, the Dao can make sense, work very well, like a flow of water. And next, we cannot do that we lost the Dao or far away. So we use the is separate Shao De. The Shao De, what they say, it's original 少德不得是以有德。少德 is upper 德 is not formed, but it is actually it has 德. It's a very turning way. They use we read Jason way. The skillful virtue action don't follow law of virtue because the actions are already full of virtue. The next, the unskillful actions of virtue don't disobey laws of virtue because actions are subtle virtue. So we follow through. We use humanity, Yi, and Li. That's Asian Chinese use Li. They slowly use the law, legalism. Then we use modern days. We use trading, free trade. I'm going to follow the chapter. That's long. I would say follow I didn't 39 and going to 39. Oneness. Yeah, that's a whole part. I guess that's everyone we talk about it, on a daily basis. Yeah, it's big. Oneness is from if vertical, Jason already separated good from sky, earth, spiritual, basin. That's and 10,7 things, and also guide for as kingdom ruler. How do you use oneness to hold together? Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next is going to be Joe, Jason, and Amon. Joe. Actually, yeah. Before I go to Joe, just a second. Amon and Jason, I mean, one question I have for you, if you could comment on this two-part division of Dao De Jing, the book 1 and book 2, and this is, we are at the transition, up to 37, 1 to 37, and then 38 to 81. So any comments that you have about that at that point? Next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, so for number 38, that something that was interesting to me is I thought about this, how the way the Tao is subservient to virtue, and how that actually, how to think through that. And the way I kind of rationalize with it is this idea where people take the idea of virtue too far, and they start to think they're acting virtuous, and then they start to think this is the way the world should be, and they lose their compassion and empathy for the rest of the world, so that it essentially you're actually getting a further away, but it's also the actions that you're taking to to be virtuous are actually a way of controlling others. And so then you start to think others should behave a certain way. So that there's a danger that comes with too much action. And that's where essentially I see where it would be subservient to the way, or the virtue would be subservient to the way, in the sense that obviously if you're acting without intention, you're just being, that you're not imposing your will on anyone else. Anyway. anyway, that's just a quick thought I had about 38.
Thank you. Next up is going to be David, followed by Jason and Amon. David.
Yes, thanks. Jason, can you scroll down for 38 to the bottom part? I mean, I think there are two ways to view this. I mean, it definitely is the obvious one is sort of this, I guess, descending level of, I don't know, enlightenment or in appreciation or embodiment of the Tao, and that people who lack the Tao, act from virtue, and there's sort of the stair step down. But I think that another important piece to get from this is the importance of having good rituals, because the point is, if the person, for whatever reason, just lack of clarity in themselves, lack of understanding, lack of principles, whatever reason that they're missing the ability to actually embody and understand the Tao, that the society and the community, religion need to have good rituals. So even if they're lacking all of these innate qualities, that they still behave well, that the rituals themselves, the society needs good foundation, good rituals, good history, in order to ensure the society functions despite not everybody being, as we say in the last lines, great people. Yes, if they are great people, you don't need these other things because they are inherently that way. But if they don't have these qualities, then you need the rituals. And exactly matching this, I'll base this on some comments I've heard from some of my other amazing Indian Hindu friends, is that this is sort of the reason for the rituals in Hinduism or in Judaism or Christianity or anything else, because it's through these rituals that one can then take the steps in the other direction and become enlightened. That first you're just doing this as an automatic without understanding it, but that there is an underlying philosophy. And if you were doing these rituals and doing them properly, I don't just mean doing it properly, like, okay, I'm lighting this candle and whatever, but if you're doing this and you start to just, it becomes ingrained in you, hopefully that and all these different, as we're talking about it, yogas in Buddhism, in Hinduism, or similar things you'll learn through the rituals of Christianity, the prayers, whatever, this will lead you, if you really start to contemplate it, to embodying and exposing, manifesting in yourself these enlightenment, whichever is your own religion, or whichever way you're going to get enlightenment. So I think it's important to understand it's not just a matter of, okay, you can have these ascending steps and okay, not great people will do this for superficial things, and think of it the exact opposite steps as well, that you start, if you don't have anything else, at least start with good rituals. And that hopefully that will lead you up to the space of good rituals to righteousness, righteousness to humaneness, humaneness to virtue, and virtue eventually to Tao, or to moksha, or to whatever the appropriate religious enlightenment and understanding is.
It's beautifully put. Thank you, David. That's a great point. Definitely very much how Gita thinks about these things. Next up is going to be Jason.
Okay, yes, look guys, it's a lot to talk, okay, on these three chapters. They are very long, and there is a transition from so-called book 1 and book 2, De and the Dao. Okay, so Amon probably can correct me. I think it's in the Ma Wang Dui, or which version, it should be the reverse, right? Should be De first, then Dao. Okay, not Dao De Jing, should be De Dao Jing. Okay, so I believe that's the right order. If you look at this one, you can look at, if you like to from 38 to 81, okay, should be on the book 1, and 1 to 37 should be on book 2. If you look at this one, okay, just quickly over on this one. From 38, you look at what's the first, 上德不德, okay, talk about virtue, okay, they talk about the skillful virtue or upper virtue and the low virtue. Both are good, okay. So that's the beginning. And the end of De Jing, that's the 81 chapter. Okay, we haven't go there yet, but I can tell you the ending is talking about non-contrive or non-compete. So not put effort to compete. So that's the finish of the book 1, or so-called book 2, the De. Dao, then after that, start to talking about Dao. Start with famously Dao ke Dao, Fei Chang Dao, right? The Dao can be expressed, it's not regular, it's not unchanging Dao, this kind of thing. So look guys, it finished the De, okay, talking about De, then finish with the no competition, this kind of word, and then start with Dao, okay? A little bit metaphysically, and end with what? 37. You look at the 37, that's important message. Wu Wei, okay, 2 key message in the whole book is here. That's in my idea, the Wu Wei and the Pu, okay, they talk about the, you see, they use a very lengthy description, okay, this word to describe, okay. Wu Wei is when you act outward, okay, when you do the manage the business, ruling the country, you should use Wu Wei. When you do yourself, for yourself as a person, should be use the word the nameless simplicity of an uncarved block, Pu. So these 2 concepts as the ending. So you will see if you reverse the book 1 and book 2, it's a pretty well laid out, okay, and the overall structure, okay, the very strong ending on this part. If you consider this one is the ending, okay, so it's very strong on this. So that's first thing I'd like to comment. Second thing I have to answer is from Madeline's question about the basin, right? So basin, this word happened a lot, okay, in the whole entire text. My translation is probably different than most of our translation in English, okay? Because Chinese is easy, they just use the word gu, okay? Everybody know what the gu, gu means the body. So the translation is body, okay? But I translate as basin, okay? And then I go through all the words about this word basin. I show up, I think it's almost 10 times. So I believe, and it's all consistent. When the Dao De Jing talk about gu, I think it means basin. That means low point, okay? And the kind of reservoir they hold the water, okay? That's what I believe. That's why I decided to translate as a basin, because it's low point. They have water on that, because they talk about the spirit of basin, Gu Shen. Okay, that's important because I believe this one happened on the agricultural area, a little bit south, and probably grow rice, and the basin to store the water is important for the agriculture. So they worry about the water. So if too much, they have a flow, they have a flood. If too little, they have a drought. So they have the spirit of the basin. That's my answer to Madeline's question. So I'm doing the translation as basin, which is gu. And when you see other translation, most likely they will do valley. Okay, because that's like Grand Canyon. Okay, the Chinese translation would be Great Gu. Okay, so that's the way we do it. Okay, so a little bit on 30, it's very long. So, okay, 38, talk about the, okay, let me see. Okay, so the other people notice is about related to virtue. Okay, so if you think about the key here, if you see 36 as the very first chapter of the Dao De Jing, start with De, okay? And what the words you see here? I read it in Chinese, the ending here, these 4 words, the ending words, De, Ren, Yi, Li, okay? So, Ren, Yi, Li, these 3 words, they are all Confucius words, okay? So, from high to low, okay? So, they lay out Ren, that's the highest word. Okay, highest virtue in Confucius. Confucius analects only have 10,000 words, and then they mention Ren, okay, 100 times. Okay, so Yi is also the word, okay, being mentioned a lot in the Confucius teaching. Then Li, which is the follow something ritually. So from high to low, and then that's the typical way of the Taoism criticize Confucianism. It's not criticize, say, oh, you are wrong, you are bad. It's not the way to do it. They usually do it. They are very good. I think just is David or Brian talk about this one. Like it's very good. Christian, Hinduism, Muslim, all doing the right thing. Okay, they do the virtual Ren, Yi, Li, and they certainly need a ritual, right? Because you cannot just have everybody go over the place. They all right, but what's the best of the best is De. Okay, so it's talking about put the De on the top than any other virtue and any other religion, any other teaching. And above the later on, it's going to talk about is Dao, even higher. Okay, so if you look at this one, is the first chapter, right? So it's set up in this way. It's a De and talk about Confucius without the naming Confucius. Okay, just talk about at that time should not call Confucius, call Ru. Okay, so De is higher, and when you finish the first book, which is the De book, then talk about Dao. Dao is even higher. Okay, so I think if you look at this way, you will see the big picture of this 81 chapter. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Amon.
It's so hard to add anything after everyone's had their say. I will say, and this is a terrible analogy, but I'll roll with it. The oldest version, yes, Jason's right. The Mengwan Dui version does place the first 38 chapters to the end of the first 37 chapters to the end, and the first 38, De and Dao are switched. Less than 100 years later, you find a Guodian version where the Dao chapters precede the De chapters, and that becomes the more received text throughout most of Chinese history. And so this sort of order of operation seems pretty consistent for thousands of years. If there were a particular reason for making that flip-flop, the only way I can really conceive of it is in terms of imagining Christians after the rise of the New Testament. They kept the Old Testament and made sure that it came before the New Testament because it was older, it was relevant. But the really important stuff was in the New Testament to that sect, that religion. Sort of a reversal of orders of that. In the older times, the important stuff, the lessons for the young princeling, the leader, the ruler, are all in these 38 through 81. These are the more densely packed cliff notes. And then the first chapters, these kind of explain, they're the backstory. They give you some antecedents for understanding this. It's a terrible analogy, but it's the best way I could think of is trying to sort of conceive of how these two relate to one another, or wind up having this mishmash flip-flopping of places. And